Welcome to the Anderton Creasy Show, where sharp analysis meets sharp wit, and no topic is off limits. Here, we cut through the noise and get to the heart of the stories shaping America today, from political power plays to the absurdities of leadership. We break it all down with a mix of insight, skepticism, and just a touch of humor. Get ready to question, rethink, and even laugh about the chaos. Because here, we don't just talk about the news, we challenge it.
Welcome back, everyone, for another deep dive.
Hmm.
Today, we're going to be talking about something that affects pretty much all of us in some way or another,
Yeah, definitely.
and that is affordable housing.
Huge topic these days.
Huge topic, and we're going to be looking at it through kind of a unique lens
Okay.
of generational wealth.
Interesting.
So using a case study here in Kansas City,
Right here in our backyard.
yeah, to look at how building financial security can actually be a tool
Okay.
for solving real problems.
I like that angle.
So we've got a pretty interesting mix of sources today.
Lay it on me.
We've got a report on kind of what the housing landscape looks like here in Kansas City.
Right?
We're going to be analyzing a specific organization called Love's House,
Love's house. Okay.
and then also looking at just the concept of generational wealth through building businesses.
So I've got like a micro and a macro view, it sounds like.
Yeah, exactly.
Oh,
So by the end of this deep dive,
all right.
hopefully you'll not only understand how to build wealth that lasts, but also see how those principles can be applied to some pretty big problems.
I'm ready. Let's do it.
All right, so let's start with just getting a lay of the land.
Okay.
What does the affordable housing situation look like here in Kansas City?
So the report paints kind of a stark picture.
Okay.
We're dealing with a pretty critical shortage of affordable housing units.
Okay.
In fact, for every 100 extremely low-income renters,
Okay.
there are only 31 affordable units available.
Oh, wow.
So that's a huge gap.
Yeah,
And then on top of that, we've got this increasing demand for market rate housing,
right.
driven by, young professionals' families moving into the city.
So you've got like a squeeze from both sides.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It's a tough situation, and I imagine that affects certain communities more than others.
Oh, absolutely. And the report highlights that, Black households in Kansas City
Yeah.
face a much heavier burden when it comes to housing affordability.
Yeah, makes sense.
So it's not just about numbers.
Right.
It's about the real impact that this is having
People's lives.
on people's lives. Exactly.
Yeah.
And this is where this organization, Love's House, comes in.
Okay, tell me about Love's House.
They're trying to tackle this in kind of a unique way.
All right.
So they're a housing provider here in the Kansas City metro area,
Okay.
but they do something pretty different.
What's that?
They offer both affordable and market rate housing.
Oh, interesting. So kind of a mixed model?
Yeah, so they're catering to different income levels.
Makes sense.
Yeah, and kind of trying to create a more sustainable system.
Interesting. So what are the strengths of that approach?
Well, one of the big ones is that they're able to use
Yeah.
the revenue from those market rate units
Okay.
to support
Oh.
their affordable housing initiatives.
Smart.
So it gives them more financial stability,
Yeah, I see that.
which means that they can keep serving the community.
Makes their mission a lot more sustainable, I'd imagine.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And it's not just about the money.
Okay.
They're also really focused on community development.
So it's not just putting up buildings?
No, they're really involved in revitalizing neighborhoods.
Okay.
They were actually instrumental in the revitalization of the 18th and Vine District.
Oh, wow. That's great. Yeah.
Yeah, which is, historically significant area here in Kansas City.
For sure. Yeah.
So they're thinking about that broader impact on the community.
I like that.
And then partnerships are also huge for them.
Partnerships. Okay.
So they work with organizations like the Kansas City Housing Authority,
Okay.
the United Way,
Yeah.
to leverage, more resources,
Uh-huh.
expertise.
More bang for their buck that way.
Yeah, exactly.
It's smart.
And I've also heard that they're incorporating sustainable design
Oh, interesting.
and energy-efficient features into their developments.
So kind of like a triple bottom line approach almost.
Yeah, so thinking about the environment as well.
It's all connected.
Yeah, and I've got to imagine that even with all these strengths, there are still challenges.
Oh, for sure. Affordable housing is a tough field.
Yeah, so what are some of the potential downsides?
Well, one of the big ones is that there's such a huge need.
Yeah.
The number of affordable units that they can provide is still pretty limited.
You can only do so much.
You can only do so much, and then there's also that risk of gentrification,
Right.
which is, a valid concern.
Yeah, because those market rate units
Right.
could end up driving up property values
Yes.
and displacing
Right.
the very people they're trying to help.
It's a delicate balance for sure.
So it's like a balancing act
Yeah.
of doing good,
Mhm.
but also being aware of those unintended consequences.
Absolutely. And it really highlights the need for a multifaceted approach to this problem.
So Love's House is just one piece.
One piece of a much larger puzzle.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay.
Now let's talk about this partnership they have with Budget Clean and Painting.
Budget Clean and Painting. What's that all about?
This one's pretty cool because they're not just focusing on housing.
Okay.
They're combining that with job training and placement
Oh, very cool.
for the residents.
So it's like giving people a pathway to self-sufficiency.
Exactly.
That's awesome.
And they've actually been really successful at getting funding
Okay.
from a variety of sources for this,
That's great because having that diversity funding is so important.
especially for something as big as affordable housing.
Absolutely.
So it shows that they're really thinking about long-term sustainability.
Yeah, for sure.
Any other aspects of Love's House's work that we should know about?
Well, one thing that stood out to me was their focus on community engagement.
Okay.
They have this outreach program
Yeah.
to make sure that the housing they're developing really aligns with what the residents need.
I like that.
So it's not just some top-down approach.
They're really listening to the community.
Exactly. It's about building that sense of ownership
Right.
and belonging.
And they're not just building new stuff.
Okay.
They're also renovating existing facilities
Okay.
to make them more welcoming and supportive.
Nice.
They've even expanded their services to include a program for homeless veterans.
Wow, that's fantastic.
Yeah, so they're really adaptable
Yeah,
to the needs of the community.
that's so important.
But even with all this good stuff, are there any vulnerabilities in their model?
Well, one potential vulnerability is the reliance on government funding, which, can be unpredictable,
Right.
subject to budget cuts.
Political whims.
Exactly. So it kind of underscores the need to have a really solid financial foundation.
Weather those storms.
Exactly. And we also have to remember that they're operating in a competitive market.
Right.
They're not the only ones out there trying to do this. So they have to be really innovative to stay ahead of the curve.
So it's this constant dance of funding community needs
Yeah.
and just the market forces.
Absolutely. It's a complex landscape.
All right, so let's shift gears a little bit and talk about this concept of generational wealth.
Okay.
I know it seems like a bit of a jump,
Yeah. How does this tie back in?
but it goes back to this idea of how financial security can be a tool for good.
Okay. I'm listening.
And Love's House is kind of embodying that in a way
Okay.
by creating this sustainable model
Yeah.
that can hopefully benefit the community for generations to come.
I see where you're going with this.
So how does generational wealth typically play out, especially through businesses?
Well, it's all about creating a legacy
Yeah.
that goes beyond just money.
Yeah.
Especially when you look at successful family businesses, they can have a huge impact on their communities
Right.
and on future generations.
It's like that ripple effect.
Exactly.
But how do you actually build that kind of lasting impact through a business?
That is the million-dollar question.
What are those key principles involved?
Well, that's something we're going to dive into in the next part of our deep dive.
So stay tuned.
We'll unpack all of that and more.
We'll see how those principles can be used to address all sorts of problems.
Problems just like the ones that Love's House is tackling.
Awesome. I'm excited to hear more about this.
Me too. It's going to be good.
All right. We'll see you next time.
Welcome back to our deep dive. We've been talking about Love's House.
Yeah, this really fascinating organization here in Kansas City.
Yeah, doing some really innovative things with affordable housing.
Really seems like they're creating a model for how to make a lasting impact.
Absolutely. And it made me think about, all those principles we talk about with generational wealth.
Yeah.
Especially when it's built through successful family businesses.
Right.
Love's House is almost like a microcosm of that.
It's like they took those ideas
Yeah.
and applied them to this whole other realm.
Totally. And
Right.
what's interesting is that there are more and more businesses out there that
Yeah.
are trying to do good in the world
Yeah.
while also, making a profit.
Yeah, it's like this idea of conscious capitalism or social impact
Benefits.
businesses.
Have you heard of B Corporation?
I have. I've heard the term, but I'm not really sure what it means.
So B Corp are basically companies that have been certified
Okay.
to meet these really high standards
Okay.
for social and environmental performance.
So it's not just saying you're doing good.
No, it's actually proving it.
You have to walk the walk.
You got to walk the walk. And it's not just a one-time thing either.
Oh, really?
They have to go through this whole recertification process every 3 years.
So they're constantly being held accountable.
Exactly. And that transparency is what really sets them apart.
And that ties back into this whole idea of generational wealth, right?
Absolutely.
It's like if you can build a business,
Yeah,
that's not only profitable,
right.
but also making a positive impact,
Right.
you're leaving behind something much bigger.
A legacy.
Yeah, than just money.
It's about building wealth with a purpose.
I love that.
And it's not just for-profit companies either.
No, really?
Nonprofits can also adopt this mindset,
Okay.
thinking about sustainability in the long term.
So do you think Love's House could become a B Corp?
I think they have a lot of the elements already in place.
Yeah.
They're focused on affordable housing. They're doing community development.
They're committed to sustainability.
Right.
It'd be interesting to see if they could meet all the requirements.
It would definitely give them even more credibility, I think,
Totally. And it might even help them attract more investors.
who are specifically looking for those kinds of businesses.
Yeah, people who want to put their money where their values are.
Exactly. We talked about foreclosures earlier,
Yeah.
but we didn't really dive into how they play into all of this.
Right. Well, foreclosures are kind of a double-edged sword.
Okay.
On the one hand, they can create opportunities
Okay.
for investors to come in and rehab properties
Okay.
and potentially turn them into affordable housing.
So that's a good thing, right?
In theory, yeah, it could increase the supply.
Okay.
But the flip side is that foreclosures often displace families,
Right.
especially those who are already struggling.
It's like they get hit the hardest.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And that can lead to all sorts of problems.
Yeah. Instability in neighborhoods.
Yeah, breaking up communities.
It's like a vicious cycle. Totally. So we need to address the root causes of the problem.
not just the symptoms.
Exactly.
And that's why what Love's House is doing is so important.
With the job training and placement.
Yeah, because they're giving people the tools to actually lift themselves up.
Empowering them to create a better future for themselves and their families.
So it's not just about a roof over your head.
Right. It's about opportunity.
So let's circle back to those principles of building generational wealth that we were talking about.
Okay.
What are some of the things that go into creating that kind of legacy?
A legacy that lasts beyond just one generation.
Yeah. What are the key ingredients?
Well, let's start with choosing the right business model.
So we're back talking about generational wealth and how it can be used to make a real difference in the world.
Yeah. It's inspiring to see what Love's House is doing.
Yeah. Using those principles to tackle the affordable housing crisis.
Exactly. But, it might seem kind of daunting
Yeah.
for someone who's just starting out.
Like, where do you even begin?
Right. Well, the first step is choosing the right business model.
Okay, so there are a lot of different options out there.
Tons of options, but not all of them are created equal.
Right. Some are better suited for this kind of social impact work.
Exactly.
So what are some models that tend to work well?
Well, one that's become really popular is the social enterprise model.
I've heard of that, but can you explain it a little more?
So basically, it's like a hybrid.
Okay.
You operate like a regular for-profit business,
Right.
but you have this built-in social mission,
Okay.
and you use a portion of your profits
Yeah.
to support that mission.
So it's like a win-win.
Exactly. You're making money and doing good at the same time.
And it's more sustainable than just relying on donations.
Exactly. You're not at the mercy of, grant cycles or
Right? Yeah.
unpredictable funding.
So you've got that steady stream of income
Equal.
coming from your business.
Now, another model that's worth considering is the cooperative model.
Cooperatives? I've heard of those, but
Yeah.
remind me how they work.
So basically, it's a business that's owned and operated by its members.
Oh, okay, like a credit union.
Yeah, exactly. Or like an agricultural co-op.
Okay.
And what's cool about co-ops is that they often prioritize social goals
Okay.
alongside profits.
So it's built into their structure.
Yeah, it's part of their DNA.
And that sense of community ownership is really powerful.
For sure.
Okay, so once you've chosen your model,
Yeah.
what's next?
Then you got to create a solid business plan.
This is where the rubber meets the road.
Exactly. You have to translate your vision into something concrete.
So what are the key things to include in that plan?
Well, you need to lay out your vision, your mission,
Yeah.
your target market, how you're going to make money.
Right. The basics.
But you also need to detail how you're going to address that social need.
Right. It can't just be an afterthought.
Exactly. It has to be baked into the plan from the beginning.
And that plan should be flexible.
Oh, absolutely. Things change. The market changes.
You have to adapt.
You got to be able to pivot.
But even with the best plan, you need the right people to make it happen.
That's where those entrepreneurial skills come in.
Yeah, we talked about those earlier.
Like resourcefulness.
Being able to make the most of what you've got.
Exactly. And resilience.
Because you know there are going to be bumps in the road.
Oh, for sure.
You got to be able to bounce back.
Absolutely. And financial literacy is key too.
Yeah, especially when you're balancing profit with a social mission.
For sure.
Are there resources out there for people who are new to all this?
Oh, tons of resources. There are organizations specifically designed
Okay.
to help social entrepreneurs.
So you don't have to reinvent the wheel.
Exactly. There are people who've done this before,
Right.
and they're usually happy to share their knowledge.
So what's the main message we want listeners to take away from this?
You know, starting a business that makes a difference is possible.
It's not just a pipe dream.
Exactly. It takes hard work, planning, resilience,
Yeah.
but it can be done.
You can build a business that does good in the world.
And that's what's so exciting about all of this.
Yeah, it's about empowering people to make a change.
Exactly.
We've seen how Love's House is doing it with affordable housing.
But this can be applied to so many other issues
It's about building a better future.
for everyone.
This has been a really inspiring conversation.
I agree.
Thanks for joining us, everyone.
And keep diving deeper.
That's a wrap for this episode of The Enter Creasy Show. If you enjoyed the ride, be sure to subscribe, leave a review, and share it with someone who loves a good debate. Keep thinking, keep questioning, and never settle for the surface story. Until next time, stay sharp, stay informed, and as always, stay bold.